Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We got a great one lined up for you today. We have Biden approving cluster bombs for Ukraine in what some would call a controversial decision. I'm going to let you know why I don't think it's controversial and why I think it's the right thing to do. Trump doxing Obama by posting a post on his Truth Social that had Obama's address, and shortly thereafter, an armed man showed up at Obama's doorstep. I'm going to get into how Trump is, in fact, directly responsible for this, even though he doesn't necessarily have to say, go and attack Obama's house. Glenn Youngkin removing info about LGBTQ suicide helplines from state website. When the righties talk about trying to save the children from being sexually groomed and whatnot, it's all just a ploy to systematically take rights away from LGBTQ people and have an excuse to do it so that they can turn to their supporters and say, look, we're helping save the children. We're not repressing rights. We're not taking rights away from people. We're saving children. That's what we're doing. But it's all just a bunch of BS, evident by Glenn Youngkin's decision. We have Carrie Lake living at Mar-a-Lago is not working out so well for her and Trump's relationship. You don't put two attention-seeking narcissists under the same roof with each other and expect them to get along for very long. And lastly, Chris Hayes equating Ron DeSantis' campaign to Ted Cruz's. And I've never quite thought of it in the way Chris Hayes puts it. And it's a really interesting, some interesting parallels that exist between Ron DeSantis' campaign and Ted Cruz's campaign. So ever since the start of the Ukraine invasion in February of 2022, the United States has been providing aid to Ukraine in various different ways. And as the war has progressed, the United States has increasingly given more and more and more munitions in an aid to stop Russia from overtaking their country. And in the past, there was red lines that were drawn by Washington. In the past, it was the Abrams tanks that weren't going to be given to Ukraine, and now we decided to give them the Abrams tanks. Then it was F-16 fighter jets. The reasoning was that it's going to take too long to train them, and they could use these outside of just the Russian-Ukraine conflict, or they could go use these in Russian homeland, so we're not going to give them those. But now we see that we're now agreeing and working to get Ukraine F-16 fighter jets. And now we're at a point where cluster bombs, which have previously been off limits in terms of aid and munitions being sent to Ukraine, are now, in fact, going to be sent to Ukraine. So I got this AP article here. It says the U.S. will provide cluster bombs to Ukraine and defends the delivery of the controversial weapons. Just read through a bit of the article here. President Joe Biden on Friday defended what he said was a difficult decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine, a move the administration said was key to fight by Ukraine's promise to use the controversial bombs carefully. The decision comes on the eve of the NATO summit in Lithuania, where Biden is likely to face questions from allies on why the U.S. would send a weapon to Ukraine that more than two-thirds of alliance members have banned because it has a track record for causing many civilian casualties. It took me a while to be convinced to do it, said Biden in a CNN interview. He said that he ultimately took the Defense Department's recommendation to provide the munitions and discussed the matter with allies and lawmakers on the Hill. He said the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition, and the cluster bombs will provide a temporary fix to help stop Russian tanks. Okay, so like I said, we've been seeing this increase of munitions as the war has dragged on. And here's why I don't think this is controversial. A few reasons, actually. Firstly, if Russia is able to ultimately take over Ukraine, and they are ultimately able to crush Ukrainian's government into submission and take over the country. Well, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but Putin gave this evil speech on the eve of the invasion of Ukraine. And he gave us this whole alternate history lesson about how the USSR is in fact still a thing in his head. And he wants to redraw international borders to include other countries in this reshaping and remaking of the USSR. Now, these would include countries such as Armenia, Belarus, Georgia, which he's already attacked in 2008, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Uzbekistan, and others that all used to be a part of the USSR. Okay, now the only thing that's stopping Putin from going further than attacking just Ukraine is that he's been bogged down fighting Ukraine because the United States and others have provided sufficient munitions and sufficient help to quell the invasion and to keep them busy attacking Ukraine. Now, if Ukraine's government fell in a matter of 2-3 days, like many were predicting, there's not any reason to think that Putin wouldn't be extending his conquering, scratching his conquering itch by attacking other countries. Because if he was able to attack Ukraine and take it over so easily, well, now he's emboldened, and his army, with a win under its belt and some success under its belt, is now emboldened to go and attack other countries, thus causing more civilian death and increasing the likelihood of a wider spread conflict. Now, also, Ukraine civilians and Ukraine's army are going to be the ones that are having to deal with cleaning up the munitions and these cluster bombs that have been they've been being blasted with them by Russia ever since the start of the invasion. And it's Ukraine who's asking for these types of munitions to be used in their homeland. So this isn't United States civilians or United States military having to go to Ukraine to potentially clean up these unexploded rounds. This is Ukraine that is going to have to deal with this for years and years and years, and it's going to be a huge issue. But guess what? They're going to have to be doing that even if the United States doesn't send cluster munitions, because Russia has already been using them. And I don't think it's for us to decide that that's too much of a risk to the Ukrainian civilians. It's a risk to the Ukrainian civilians of Russia's invasion succeeding, and Ukrainians losing their government and continuing to being subjected to the torture and brutality that the Russians have inflicted upon them. So, if Ukraine's asking for them, and they're well aware of the risks of these weapons dudding, is what it's called. When a bomb is dropped and it doesn't explode, it's called a dud. Okay, so if they're well aware of the risk, then it should be for their decision to decide whether or not to use these weapons. It shouldn't be where the United States has a moral say and going, we're not going to provide Ukraine these weapons because it's a risk to Ukrainian civilians, but the Ukrainian civilians want to use these weapons against Russia because they want to save their country from being invaded. Also, Russian artillery shells have a much higher dud rate than the American ones that we're sending them. So, like I said earlier, these bombs are already everywhere. All over the battlefields. These munitions are left unexploded, and they're going to have to figure out how to defuse these explosives one way or the other, and that's all because Russia decided to invade the country in the first place. There would be no unexploded munitions in Ukrainian homeland if Russia didn't decide and Putin didn't decide to invade Ukraine in the first place. So For all those reasons, I believe that giving Ukraine whatever they need is the right option. And as long as we are able to have certain security guarantees, that Zelensky can promise us that he's not going to use these weapons to attack Russia in Russian homeland. You know, there has to be some strings attached, but I don't think we're really in a position to make any moral decisions about what kind of weapons should be used in Ukraine and by whom they should be used and in what scenarios they should be used. It's for Ukraine to decide that, and it's for the United States has every right to supply any country it wants with whatever munitions it wants or whatever anything else it wants for that matter. So yeah, props to Biden here. This is the right decision. This is a war that must be won at all costs. And what I'm wondering is that what is off limits now that in the future we're going to start giving to them. And if Ukraine can benefit from having as much munitions given to them now, I'm not sure what the point of having anything be off limits is. I think we need to get Ukraine everything they can to win the war, because if they don't win the war, the consequences are dire for the region and for the Ukrainian people. Trump doxed Obama by posting a post on his social media site that has Obama's address on it. Crazy stuff. LA Times article here. Trump posted what he said was Obama's address. An arrest followed. We got these losers surrounded. See you in hell, Podestas and Obamas. The AP. Former President Trump posted on a social media platform what he claimed was the home address of former President Obama on the same day a man with guns in his van was arrested near the property, federal prosecutors said Wednesday in revealing new details about the case. Taylor Tarano, 37, who prosecutors say participated in the January 6th riot, kept 2 firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition inside a van he had driven cross-country and had been living in, according to a Justice Department motion that seeks to keep him behind bars. On the day of his June 29th arrest, prosecutors said, Toronto reposted a Truth Social post from Trump containing what Trump claimed was Obama's home address. In a post on Telegram, Toronto wrote, "We got these losers surrounded. See you in hell, Podestas and Obamas." Wow. Toronto also told his YouTube live stream that he was looking to get a good angle on a shot. So these are the real world consequences of Donald Trump's social media endeavors. And what Trump says on social media and what other GOP people say on social media has real world effects. And I want to introduce you all to a term that you may or may not have heard before, which is stochastic terrorism. Okay? And what stochastic terrorism is the public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act. The public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act. Does that sound like anything that's happened in the past to you? Unfortunately, it sounds very, very, very much so like something that's happened in the past to me. So when January 6th happened, you know, all these people, you know, Trump's railing about how the election is rigged and there's election fraud and the country's being stolen and the Democrats are stealing away the democracy from right from under us. And that caused all these people to show up at the Capitol and to attack the Capitol and to try to interrupt the proceeding. And what Trump claims is that, oh, well, I wanted it to be peaceful and I never said directly go into the Capitol and disrupt the official proceeding and go through the halls and search for Nancy Pelosi and search for Mike Pence and erect a gallows to hang Mike Pence. And no, Trump doesn't have to say all of that directly. The things that he's insinuating are what's motivating people to take the actions that they're taking. Therefore, Trump would be a perpetrator of stochastic terrorism. Another example, think of when Paul Pelosi was attacked with a hammer in his San Francisco home last year. Did anybody on the GOP say, break into Nancy Pelosi's home in San Francisco and go in there with a hammer and hit him on the head with a hammer? No, nobody said that exactly. But what the GOP has insinuated is that Nancy Pelosi is an enemy to the country, and that what a real patriot would do, that Trump supporters are real patriots and we're on the right side of history, and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are anti-Americans. Well, if somebody is led to believe that, and they believe it in their heart of hearts, that would lead them to commit violence and to sort of play out what's going on in their head to make it a reality and to put it out onto the world in some sort of way. So when these GOPers talk about how the election is rigged and how Democrats are evil and how the government is all against them, and this stuff has real world consequences, okay? And it's not funny. It's not it's not in the slightest way something that should be taken lightly or brushed off. I think that these GOPers are directly responsible for many of the domestic terrorism incidents that we've seen in recent years. And as the GOP continues down this path of spewing out hate and spewing out lies about how the Democrats are an evil party or whatever, this sort of stuff is only going to continue. This sort of the results of stochastic terrorism will continue to be felt by people in this country, unfortunately. Glenn Youngkin has removed LGBTQ suicide helplines from the state website. Now, I thought the GOP was all about trying to save the children, trying to help out children not be sexualized. I thought that was their whole plan. Why would anybody ever want to remove an LGBTQ hotline if you're just trying to help the children? Doesn't make any sense. So let's see here. LGBTQ Nation. GOP's governor administration removes info about LGBTQ plus suicide helpline from state website. The administration removed a page dedicated to resources for LGBTQ youth from the state's Department of Health website after the far-right outlet, The Daily Wire. The Virginia Mercury reports that the Virginia Department of Health's resources for LGBTQ youth page included links to Virginia Pride, the Trevor Project, the Virginia Anti-Violence Project, and other organizations and resources providing helpline, suicide prevention programs, and medical and counseling services for queer youth. Emails obtained by Virginia Mercury under the state's Freedom of Information Act indicate that on May 31st, a reporter for the Daily Wire sent a list of questions primarily focused on two sites linked on the page: Q Chat Space, which offers live chat discussion groups for LGBTQ and question and teens, and Queer Kid Stuff, which features a kid-friendly video series discussing LGBTQ plus topics, as well as resources for parents and educators. I mean, oh my goodness, can you imagine what would happen if LGBTQ kids felt that it was okay to like a person from their same gender, imagine if children felt accepted and felt proud of their identity. Why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad thing? I do not understand why children feeling accepted and loved and comfortable in their own skin is bad. And when DeSantis, when Youngkin gets on his high horse about saying he's wanting to save children, and we're not actually against gay people, we're not actually homophobic, we're just wanting to save our children from being groomed sexually. Well, what that includes is removing resources that help LGBTQ people, and yes, children, feel welcome and feel accepted, and resources that help them get help when they're feeling depressed and when they're feeling like they are not happy with their lives. Like, LGBTQ youth are already think about suicide way more than the rest of the population. They commit suicide way more than the rest of the population. And what GOPers point to is well, yeah, because we're encouraging them to change their gender or whatever, and that's not what a kid should be doing, or that's not what a kid that young shouldn't be making decisions about the rest of their life or whatever. But oftentimes, not being accepted for who they are and having their true identity be repressed is what leads them to need these resources more. It's not that being gay means that you're automatically going to be more in need of these resources. Okay, it's just that there's so much of society that is against gay people that they need these sort of spaces that are just for them. If there wasn't so much angst and so much repression of LGBTQ people in this country, we wouldn't be needing these resources as much as we do. And then, so for a guy like Youngkin to, make it harder for LGBTQ people and then take away the resources that exist to help them, it's a double whammy of hatred, spitefulness that is just awful. It's just awful. Why should children who are LGBTQ not have resources to learn about their identity and to learn about their feelings about themselves and about their sexual identity? Why is that a bad thing? I don't get it. I do not get why that is a bad thing, people. Carrie Lake and Donald Trump have been getting closer and closer with each other, and Carrie Lake, in fact, actually moved in with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, essentially, and she's been spending a lot of time there. And apparently now Trump is just not that into her, according to a new Vanity Fair article. Oh, excuse me. So let's go ahead and look at this Vanity Fair article here, which says, one second here. Okay, here we go. Intelligencer. Trump sours on Carrie Lake because she's too Trumpy. Since 2015, Donald Trump has been remaking the GOP in his image. But one of his top sycophants might have misstepped by taking the Be Like Trump mandate not just seriously, but literally. Kari Lake is a TV news anchor turned election Arizona gubernatorial candidate. She claims in Trumpy fashion that she lost the 2022 election because she was a victim of election fraud. Yada, yada, yada. We all know that. But now several Trump aides tell the Daily Beast that he's souring on the idea on the idea of her being vice president. She's a shameless, ruthless demonog who wants power and will do whatever she has to do to get it, a Trump advisor told the Daily Beast. This advisor added that in recent months, Trump has been less enthusiastic about Lake himself. Two Trump advisors who spoke to the Daily Beast said that the heart of Trump's frustration with Lake is that in his eyes, she always wants attention. One of the advisors put it, she's a spotlight hound. Wow. So, like I said earlier, we know that Kari Lake has been spending a lot of time at Mar-a-Lago trying to cozy up to Trump, and maybe in the hopes of trying to be his running mate in 2024. And here's the thing, okay? Trump and Lake are narcissists, all right? It's not too hard to be able to tell that. And when you get two narcissists in a room with each other, they might get along for a bit. They might be able to have a surface level sort of relation with each other. But after a period of time passes, two narcissists that are in the same vicinity with each other a lot are going to start to chomp at each other's ankles, because the inherent self-centeredness and egotisticalness and the constant need for admiration and attention and to be told they're the best, that is a driving force of a narcissist. And when you have two of these people around each other, what happens is that one person getting attention and having sunshine blown up their butt, the other narcissist is going to observe that, and they're going to feel like they're having attention taken away from them from the presence of the other narcissist. So this is why, narcissists seek out people who are empathetic and who are people pleasers, and people who will go out of their way to make sure everybody's happy and to not stir the pot and to keep everything as peaceful as possible. But when somebody like Kari Lake, who, yeah, she is power hungry, she is, a demonog. She most certainly is. But guess what? So is Trump. That's what this advisor doesn't say. So is Trump. So it's not too hard to see how these two personality types would eventually clash with each other and not really provide an environment for political planning, for political deal makings, for really to plan to benefit your campaign at all. So Kari Lake is a really interesting person for all of the worst, terrible reasons you could possibly think of. She's an interesting person. In that, I think deep down, Kari Lake knows what she's doing. She doesn't believe all of this crap about election fraud and about the government being against the American people and whatever other conspiracies that she spews out. She's smart, okay? She was on TV for years and years and years, and it's not an easy job to be a TV anchor, okay? And I don't think she even believes what she says all the time. And I think she purely sees Trump as a means to an end. And so it's interesting that this Trump aide is calling it out as it is, but it wasn't too hard to see Kari Lake's intentions, and that Kari Lake didn't really believe what she believes in. Kari Lake doesn't believe in what she says. it wasn't too hard to see that months and months and months ago. You know what I mean? Or even, way prior to the 2022 midterm. So why Trump exactly would let Kari Lake cozy up to him if he doesn't want anything to do with her? Or, it just shows Trump's short-sightedness and how his ego is always getting in the way of him making savvy political decisions. And yeah, Kari Lake, she's I imagine that she's taking up a lot of air out of the room over there at Mar-a-Lago, because she has to be the most important person in the room, and so does Trump. So yeah, it's not too hard to see how this sort of little relationship that they got going on is already starting to sour, and let's see how much longer it even lasts at all. And let's see if pretty soon Kari Lake isn't being called a rhino, and the MAGA sycophants are turning on Kari Lake because Trump sicked them on her. Might not be too long until that happens. Chris Hayes on MSNBC equated Ron DeSantis' campaign to Ted Cruz. And for some reason, it just makes a lot of sense to me. And I haven't necessarily thought of it like this in the past, but it really, really does make a lot of sense. And the parallels are there. So let's go ahead and watch. Chris Hayes take down Ron DeSantis in comparing him to Ted Cruz.
Those that say there's something about you that's not connecting for whatever reason, not connecting with the voter, whether or not it be personality. Donald Trump says it's about loyalty. Francis Suarez says it's about your relationships. And it's not about those individuals so much as I'm curious in the analysis of Ron DeSantis of why not yet is connecting.
Well, I think, did you just see the news today about the record fundraising haul we've had? Nobody's been able to match that in the history of modern presidential politics.
Okay, a few things. Now, to be fair to Ron DeSantis, it's an impossible question posed by Fox News fill-in host last night, who has had his own troubles connecting in the past. There's no good way for any politician to answer, like, what's wrong with you? Why don't people like you? And yet it's a consistent genre of campaign questions. But that really is not the kind of question a candidate wants to be hearing at this point in the campaign. And on that front, DeSantis really does only have himself to blame for being in this position, pulling 30 points behind Donald Trump 6 weeks after.
30 points, ladies and gentlemen. 30 behind Trump. Not going to catch up.
Formally launching his bid for president. The Florida governor has made a career out of being the far right-wing king. From the Don't Say Gay law to banning trans health care in the state of Florida and banning abortion after 6 weeks and shipping migrants out of the state, possibly in what some believe was a criminal scheme, DeSantis has positioned himself as the hardest core member of the MAGA army. And while that may get him airtime on Fox, and in fact it has, I don't think it's broadly popular among the general population, general electorate. But also, there's a precedent here he should think of, because others have tried this exact same model before and it failed spectacularly. Do you remember the disastrous presidential campaign of one Texas Senator, Ted Cruz? In 2016, he tried to run on his record as, well, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, an extreme conservative jerk. In his very first year in office, Cruz helped engineer a pointless government shutdown. He alienated members of his own party and fueled punchlines with his antics, including a secret meeting at a Tex-Mex restaurant called Tortilla Coast and a dramatic reading of Dr. Seuss during a marathon filibuster.
Gotta pause it real quick before we hear him recite Dr. Seuss. Man, Ted Cruz has aged a lot in 10 years. Holy crap. He looks way, way, way better 10 years ago.
Sam I am. That Sam I am, that Sam I am. I do not like that Sam I am.
Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham.
Cruz went on to stake out the furthest right positions on everything from immigration to gay marriage, calling the landmark Supreme Court ruling on marriage, quote, among the darkest hours of our nation. And on climate change, Cruz went so far to the right, he basically fell off the edge of his flat Earth.
The satellite data demonstrate that there has been no significant warming whatsoever for 17 years. Now, that's a real problem for the global warming alarmists. Today, the global warming alarmists are the equivalent of the flat earthers. You know, it used to be, it is accepted scientific wisdom, the earth is flat, and this heretic named Galileo was branded a denier.
The satellite data, how's that holding up? No warming. You think there's no warming happening? So that was the 2016 version of the Ron DeSantis playbook. Be as obnoxiously right-wing as possible. And yes, Cruz did eke out a win in Iowa. Do we all remember that? He won Iowa. And he took on Carly Fiorina as a running mate. And he did look like a contender sort of for a little while. But in the end, how did the obnoxious far-right act work out for Ted?
Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
Ted Cruz, Lucifer in the flesh.
I hate Ted Cruz, and I think I'll take cyanide if he ever got the nomination.
I'm beginning to understand why Ted Cruz has been hated by everyone, every place he's ever been, from kindergarten to the United States Senate.
If you killed Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate, and the trial was in the Senate, nobody can convict you.
He is Lion Ted. It's L-Y-I-N apostrophe Lion Ted.
Once again, Lion Ted!
Sir, America is a better country
Without you.
Oh my goodness. So a lot of parallels here to Ron DeSantis' campaign, in that, you know, it's being a jerk and being the biggest conservative jerk you could possibly be. It works with a certain subset of the population, and it might even get you a win in Iowa or whatever. But in terms of relating to the country's problems and pitching yourself as a solution or as the future, just being a jerk and being the furthest right as you possibly can on every single issue, and acting like you're God's gift to the earth because you have the rightest position, on the furthest right position on any given issue. It just doesn't really work with the American people. We like to laugh at these people, and it's not, these aren't candidates that are taken seriously in the end. So DeSantis needs to stop being so much like Ted Cruz, and if he is to, in my opinion, chip into that 30% lead that Trump currently has, does he have the ability or the wherewithal or the resources to do it? I don't necessarily think so. I think that Trump is pretty much going to be the nominee at this point, and I don't see any path for anybody but Trump to be the nominee. That's all I got for you guys in this show. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below, and also check out the link in the description if you want to send me a voicemail, and I'm going to be replying to voicemails in a video at least once a week. So go ahead and do that. You can ask me anything you want. Send me love, send me hate, whatever. I'll listen to them. But again, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, and peace.